Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this chapter 4, information on activity-based costing. And we've been talking about the overhead rates, and we've been talking about using one factory-wide predetermined overhead rate, and then as we incur the driver throughout the year, we will go ahead and apply the cost using our predetermined overhead rate that we would have come up with. Remember, we talked about using the high-low method, etc., to come up with that, which I'm not going to ask you about how you'd come up with a predetermined overhead rate. You just need to know that once you have it, you're going to go ahead and apply that rate. And so what we are going to learn here is that a company does not have to have one predetermined manufacturing overhead rate. As I've mentioned before, a company could have multiple rates for these different activities, okay? And so we're going to see that instead of having one rate, we're going to have several rates, and those rates could be by department, it could be by product line, okay? And we're going to see sort of the idea of activity-based costing, and then just sort of see some of the calculations that you have to go through. I think that once you get used to these calculations, these are actually pretty easy questions, but they can seem a little complex to you as you're going through and looking at them at the first time. So hang in there with a few of these as we go through, and you'll see after a while that you start to understand the process and you're in pretty good shape to go through these. So when we are dealing with our traditional manufacturing overhead application, in the traditional costing, we're just going to have one overhead rate, and we are only going to apply our manufacturing costs to our jobs. Remember, our administrative costs, we were expensing those directly, right? And we said that several times that we would expense those. When we're dealing with ABC costing, activity-based costing, we will have multiple rates, and we will allocate our non-manufacturing costs to our products as well as our manufacturing costs. So ABC gets both of those. Okay. Also, with our manufacturing costs, we do not necessarily allocate all manufacturing costs to the cost of our product. There are some that we'll see that are not really value-added costs, and we actually will not allocate all of our manufacturing costs, only those that relate to specific activities that are used to generate our product. Okay, so what we're going to see, and we've already learned the sort of plant-wide overhead rate process. We have one rate for the entire company, and we use that one rate to allocate our costs. Departmental overhead rates, you know, depending on the number of departments, one department, two departments, we could have a couple of different rates. And I mentioned that we might do that because not all departments would have similar costs necessarily. So we go ahead and we would use a departmental rate. At the activity level, we will allocate our costs based on our individual products and the individual activities that use up those specific resources associated with that particular product. So we're going to allocate our costs based on the activities that are necessary to generate that product. So we'll see, as you can see, the number of cost pools and the number of drivers are going to go up, even though they don't mention cost pool drivers here. Both of those will go up, and they say level of complexity, and that you're going to have to calculate multiple rates when you look at that. Okay, so just taking a look, each ABC cost pool has its unique measure of activity. With a traditional system, we usually use one level of activity. Again, we've been using direct labor hours quite a bit. Sometimes we use machine hours, etc., right? Okay, so instead of having one rate, we're going to have multiple rates. Okay, so we're going to have our activity. We're going to have our activity pools, and we're going to come up with a rate per activity, and then we're going to assign those costs to our products based on the number of those activities that they use up at any point in time. Okay, and so we're going to see that we're going to have the cost driver, and that we'll call it a cost driver. We could also call it an activity measure, and our allocation base is going to be that cost driver, whatever that is, activity measure, cost driver. You'll see it referred to as both here. Okay. So instead of having the one level, we're going to see that there are basically 5 levels of activity. In this class and in your your quiz questions that we're going to go through and on your exam, you really will see organizational level. For activity-based costing, you'll see unit level activity, batch level activity. It's really where we focus. We don't necessarily get into some of these other product. We'll have some product level activity. So we'll have unit level, product level, batch level. Not so much these organizational, sustaining, or customer level activities, but you could, allocate your cost using any of these 5 under activity-based costing. Or you may have different ones for different products. It just depends what this company is involved in. Okay, and this is a little hard to read, but you'll probably see it better when you get this and you print it out or whatever. But I have this document that I've used in the past to explain activity-based costing, and I think it sort of takes some of those key points from those slides and summarizes it down for you. So this is probably a pretty good slide for you to take a good look at and remember. And I think this is more worthwhile to read for you than to necessarily go through every single one of those slides that we just did, and it picks up some of the key points. Okay, so let's just go ahead and let's take a look at this one. And we say that traditional costing systems have a single cost pool with a single plant-wide overhead application rate using a single allocation base, whatever it is, direct labor hours, machine hours. That's what we've been studying. We just have one rate for the whole factory, right? Okay. Then what? These rates generally are volume-based drivers. Again, there's our typical examples, direct labor hours. We've been working with that, or machine hours. Okay. And what can happen is you can have a distortion of your product cost because not all products will use those number of machine hours, those number of labor hours. They may have other activities that are more related to their particular product, and so we're getting a cost distortion by just sitting there and using that one driver. So what we're going to learn for activity-based costing, and what we've already seen, but I like this better because it summarizes it better. Activity-based costing refines traditional cost method and assumes that the resources consuming activities with specific purpose, and ABC assumes the best way to assign indirect costs is based on the demand for resources claiming activities. So we're going to see what activities are specific to a particular product. We're going to then come up with the rates for those activities, and then we assign the cost to those products based on the amount of that particular activity they use. Okay, and so with traditional system, we have how many cost drivers? Just the one, right? The company-wide one. And with ABC, we're going to have multiple costs, multiple drivers, and multiple overhead rates. Okay, so instead of having one rate, we'll have several. Okay, so let's just go ahead then and take a look at this example, which is a little tiny up there. I can try. So far, not so good. Let me see. See if I get out of this. Let me see if I do it this way. Maybe it'll let me make it a little larger. Maybe if I do it this way when I'm not in slideshow. Let's try it again. Yeah, we can make it larger. We'll just have to sort of move around the screen. Is that a little bigger? Okay. So we're going to be somewhat limited on what we're going to be able to do here. You know, it might be better than trying to do it in the slide. Let me see if I can find the, I'm going to have trouble finding the original PDF for that. I think it's probably going to be here. There it is. Okay. That might be a little easier for me to stretch it that way. If I get rid of this thing. A little better? Hello? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at this example. Hopefully, though, the problem is it won't let me write on this one. That's why I had put it on the slide. Maybe I could do it by highlighting. We'll see. Why is my highlighter so yellow? Okay, well, let's see what we can do. It's going to be a little tough, but let's see. So we have this Iowa production, makes two products. They have a traditional cost accounting system for the application of overhead rates to the products. Currently, they use direct labor hours as an application base. The product can incurred 150,000 direct labor hours, and the product bottle was at 45,000 direct labor hours. And they are converting to an activity-based costing system. The estimated cost data for their year one operation is summarized below. And so we go ahead and we take a look. I'm probably going to just use the pointer to point some of these numbers because I can't write on this, and why we have to have a light shining straight on the screen is beyond me as well. But anyway, we have what? We sit here and we have our cost. This is our cost pool, $3,120,000, right? That's our cost pool. And then we look at our number of hours that we're going to use, and they tell us that it was 150,000 hours for the cans, and it was what? 45,000 direct labor hours for the bottles. So we go ahead and we add up the 150 plus the 45. That's 195,000 direct labor hours, right? Hello? Okay. And so what happens? We go ahead and in the traditional system now, we would take those total 3,120,000 hours and divide them by the, $3,120,000 of cost, and divide them by the what? By the number of hours that you see right here now, and come up with an amount per direct labor hour, right? Is that what we were doing before in the traditional system? Okay, that we learned. And now we have a cost per direct labor hour, and then we simply take the number of hours that were used by cans and the number of hours that were used by bottles, and that's how we allocate our overhead using the traditional system based on the number of direct labor hours that were used by each one of those products, right? Okay, and when you do that, then they simply take the number of bottles, the number of cans, and in this example, and it was done to sort of, this was engineered so that it would come out the same. It comes out to exactly the same, doesn't it? $4.80 per can, $4.80 per bottle. Now, what we do with activity-based costing is we're going to go ahead and we're going to say, well, wait a minute, each one of these products uses a different number of these resources. And so we're going to come up with a rate of these activities, I should say, and we're going to come up with a rate per activity, right? Okay, so when we use a rate per activity, we say, well, what was the cost of materials handling? And you can see that the cost of materials handling is what? Assuming I could highlight in a straight line. The cost of materials handling is what? $480? Okay, and so when we use that cost of materials handling, we pick that up, that 480. Let me try it this way, and that might work a little better. Oh, great. Okay, it's 480, and then you go ahead and you go up, and they divide that by 160,000 pounds. And again, I can't write properly on this thing, otherwise I would have shown you. 100 plus what? 60 is 160,000 pounds, right? And so they bring that 160,000 total, and they bring that down here, and that's the cost of the materials handling is what? 480 divided by the 160,000 pounds is going to give me this $3 per pound, right? Right? The cost of materials handling is what? 480. We handled how much? 160,000 pounds. That gives us a cost for the materials handling, right? Okay. Question on that? All right. So we go to the next one now, and we come back up, and we say that we have production orders cost us 90,000. And we have what? We have number of production orders are 200. 100 plus 100 is 200, right? You come down, there's the $90,000 divided by how many orders? 200. We have a cost per order, don't we? Okay, then you come back up, and you have what? Production redesign, and that costs $250, and the cans only have a production design of redesign of 50, and the bottles are 200, aren't they? Okay, so you go ahead, that's what, 250 total? Going to be divided by the 250,000, is that what we did? Now that's $1,000 per change, and the reason I highlighted that was when I'm looking at this question, I'm thinking, uh-oh, bottles are probably a little more expensive to produce than we thought because they use a lot of that very expensive activity, don't they? So we're assigning our cost now on activities, and we're going to get a much better look at the cost of our products now by measuring the amount of each activity that they use, right? Okay, so then we come over and we just do that last one, which is plant utilities. 2,300,000 is the cost on that. Cans uses 150, bottles uses 180 machine hours, and so we come down and we do the same thing. What's that going to be? 230 divided by that 2,300,000. So it's $10 per machine hour. So do we have multiple rates? Is there a question, guys? Because I don't want us to turn into, sidebar lecture the whole time. Is there something I can answer over there? Oh, it's on the PowerPoint, but it's too small on the PowerPoint, so I'm just using the full PDF. And I'll put the full PDF up there too, so you can see the whole document. I didn't put it on Canvas. I put it into the slides because I thought we'd use it as part of the whole presentation, but it's too small for you guys to see unless I put it there. Okay, just want to make sure we're all on the same page here because this gets a little bit tricky. It's the reason I'm trying to make sure we're all on the same page here. Okay, so now what happens? So now with the cans, we've come up with a cost per activity, haven't we? Okay, so now we sit here and we just come over and we say, okay, the cans, we know the cans used what? 100,000 had 100,000 pounds of material handling. Just coming back up, see the 100,000 pounds for the cans for material handling, right? And so what happens? You take that 100,000, you multiply it by that cost per pound of material handling, and so the material handling for cans is 300,000, right? We do the same thing with the production orders. It's 450 per order, and we come up here and we take a look and we say, okay, 450 per order, and the cans had how many orders? Had 100 orders, 100 times the 450, and we're getting what? 100 times the 450, we're getting 45,000 for the orders, right? Right here. Okay, now production redesign, remember that was the one that was $1,000, and remember I said the cans only had 50? Okay, so we get that, and then we go ahead, plant utilities, it was $10 per hour, and what? The cans used 150,000, right? So we have allocated our costs based on the amount of the activity that each one of these products is using, right? We do the same thing with bottles. We say, okay, $3 per hour, 60,000 per pound, 60,000 pounds used by bottles. So we go ahead and we multiply that out for the bottles. Then what? The production orders, it was $450 per, and we had 100 orders for each of them, right? 100 for the cans, 100 for the bottles, remember? So I don't have to scroll back up here. And then we had what? We had $1,000 per item for the order change, and this one used what? 200 changes. So it sucked up a lot of that expensive resource, didn't it? Okay, and then we go, and that's why I highlighted that one, and then the same thing for the machine hours. And so now you come up with the costs that were assigned to each one of these, and notice, and I wrote in what was being allocated based on the difference of what was being allocated to each one of these versus traditional. And notice the distortion that you would have gotten using traditional. The difference in the numbers were what? Were much greater in what we're allocating to bottles under the traditional, under the activity-based costing than we would have been under traditional, right? So there was a distortion that was there if we had used traditional versus versus what we're using now, which is activity-based costing. So you come over and you go ahead now and you divide by the number of cans and the number of bottles, the cost that we've allocated using activity-based costing now, divided by the number of units. It was what? It was, we had said earlier on, 500, in this example, 500,000 cans, 150,000 bottles, and look at what happens. Instead of it being whatever it was, 480 per bottle, now and can, now we're noticing that the bottles are much more expensive, aren't they? And they're more expensive because they use, I'm thinking, the real cause of this is that change that happens, right? And so there's a couple of different things that the company would do at this point. They could either look at, and it depends on how much they're selling the bottles for, because maybe there's a bigger profit margin, and we're going to talk about cost, volume, profit analysis in the next chapter. But if the bottles sell for a lot more, they may just go ahead and live with this situation, but think about how we can reduce some of the cost of that changing the orders, right? Or maybe there's something we can do where we make an investment up front. We redesign the factory so that we always have a section of the factory set up for bottles or something. We don't have to change as many things. I don't know. However, we would drive down the cost of that very costly activity, right? And it allows us to really focus on ways of increasing the efficiency of the company. Okay, question on this example? Make sense? Okay. All right, good. So what we're going to do, that's the PDF, is see if we can get back into the PowerPoint now and start to look at a bunch of the questions that we have placed there. So let's just take a look and come back to the slideshow from current slide. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can put myself back in tablet mode without things blowing up on me here. Okay, that seems to be okay. And you can see that okay? Okay. Now I put this slide up earlier because I just want to remind you we're going to look at 3 different levels of doing this. We're going to do it by company-wide, which factory-wide, okay, plant-wide, which we've already learn that in whatever it was, chapter 2, whatever. And then what? Then we're going to see, well, what happens if we have a departmental level of rates, and then we're going to see what happens if we have an activity level of rates. Like that one you just saw was activity-based costing. We probably had 4 or 5 rates there, didn't we? Okay, so let's just go ahead and take a look at this first question, and this first question is real easy. This is almost more of a review of the other chapter than it is learning. We're not really learning any new material here, but let's just go ahead and review that, and that they give us the total cost of what? 5,240. You know, I took this question out of chapter 4. I could have just as easily taken it out of chapter 1 or 2 when we did this, right? We would come up with our predetermined overhead rate by taking the total cost, and we're using our indirect labor. Remember the one we used indirect labor hours, but we could have also used the dollars. I mean, not indirect, but direct labor hours, but we also could have used the direct labor cost. Okay, so they're going ahead and they're picking up the total overhead, and they're using indirect labor as their base, and they go ahead. I see they're picking up the what? The overhead cost, and they're calling out the indirect labor as separate. So they're going to pick up both of those numbers. Okay, that's what's going on here. I don't know why they're picking out indirect labor separately. I guess they wanted to just see, do you know that that goes into the overhead, right? Is all we were doing. Remember that one problem we had where we had to go through a checklist to see what should be and shouldn't be overhead? So you had to know that. And then they go ahead and they're not using direct labor hours here. They're using what? Machine hours is their allocation. So they're coming up with a plant-wide base, aren't they? Okay, and you can see there's some potential distortion there because you're using as your base machine hours, and I'm not exactly sure that indirect labor relates to machine hours unless most of our indirect labor is being driven by maintenance workers or something that are jumping around from machine to machine. I don't know, but there's a potential distortion there. Okay, so we're going to see that we would probably come up with multiple rates, or at least 2 rates based on this same fact pattern if we wanted to, right? Okay, okay, good. Now you come over and you take a look at this next one, and this one now is going to come up with the cost by department, right? So notice now our rates are going to have more rates. The number of rates that we're going to have are going to come up, aren't they? Okay, so in this one now, they take the $500,000 that is associated with the mixing department, right? Mixing department is $500,000, and they're going to pick that up, and then they're going to use machine hours, they tell us. No, direct labor hours. Is that what it is? Okay, so they use the direct labor hours, so they just pick up that 500,000. They have the what? Direct labor hours that they use, and they come up with $1.67 per hour, and that's just for what per direct labor hour? But that's just for the mixing department, isn't it? Okay, we would have a separate rate for the baking department, and I'm pretty sure I put that as the next question. No, I didn't. So we can do it ourselves, and I thought I had stuck it in there. So if we want to come up with a rate for the baking department, okay, what would we use? Let's say we decide for the baking department we're going to use machine hours. Makes sense to use machine hours for the baking department because most of the baking's done by the oven. I don't think the guy's sitting there holding a hairdryer over that stuff trying to cook it, right? So it's going to pretty much be the machine hours, isn't it? Right, the oven hours, whatever. And so what happens? We come over here, and we have the overhead cost is what? 400,000. And I'm going to use. They're calling it machine hours. I guess is an oven a machine? I guess it is, right? But I'm thinking that's more. They could have been more specific or more creative here and just given us oven hours. But if we use 800,000 machine hours as our driver, now we have, what's that, 50 cents per hour? Okay, the takeaway here is that what? We have multiple rates, right, or 2 rates anyway by department. Question? Why are you guys looking at me like a spaceship is landing? That's not the look that you look for. If I was doing magic tricks up here, I'd be saying, ooh, okay, I really got him that time. Question? Yeah, 400,000 is the baking overhead cost, and then they're doing what? They're using machine hours instead of direct labor hours, right? The takeaway here is the what? The different rates depending on what amount of the resources they use. In other words, I'm looking the mixing part. And that could have been machine hours too, guys. I mean, but we don't know. We're not on this factory floor looking at this place, seeing what they're doing. But what's happening? I'm picturing that a guy's having to sit there and handle the mixer and make sure it's set up right so that we don't get lumps in the dough or whatever it is the guy is doing. But he's kind of handling that whole thing while it's mixing, right? So the company makes a determination, this bakery makes a determination that direct labor hours is the driver there, right? But once he gets to the point where he's poured the dough into the pan that they're going to use to bake the cakes or whatever, then he just puts it into the oven and he walks away and just remembers to come back, or maybe even the oven shuts off after the amount of time, right? So they won't burn anything. I don't know. And so he's not standing there tending to those things while they're baking, right? And so what happens? For that, we say, well, machine hours is the appropriate driver. If we use direct labor hours, we would get a distortion of our cost per product because we'd be using direct labor hours for a product that maybe there's not as much mixing involved in it and there's more baking time involved in it, right? So now that you have this cost by department, you can assign for your unit so much cost for the mixing, depending on how much direct labor hours that one uses. You can assign that product so much time for the for the baking, depending on how much baking time it needs. If you have an item that you got to bake for a long time, I don't know what thing you would bake for a long time, then that's going to get more of the baking cost, right? Okay, so we get a better look at how our costs are being assigned to the products this way. Okay. So now let's go ahead and take a look at one in which we are going to now finally really be talking about activity-based costing. We talked about one plant ride overhead. We did it now by department. Now we are going to go ahead and do it by activity. So this question really starts to get us into activity-based costing. And we have this ice cream company that makes two products here. They have ice cream sandwiches and they have dessert bars. Great. Here we go talking about food again, right? All these questions seem to be people that write these questions must be hungry all the time, right? So we have these two types of things, and then they tell us what the expected cost is, and we've called out two activities here. In the example that we went through on that PDF file, there were several activities, right? But this one, we're only dealing with two activities. Most of the problems that you're going to see in your midterm and stuff are typically going to be just a couple of activities. I'm not going to have you deal with 5 different activities because we just want to see to get the gist of what's going on here with this, right? And so we have these two activities, and we have the cost associated, whatever extrusion cost is, and then we have packing cost, okay? And notice they tell us that for extrusion cost, it's the batches is the allocation base, okay, the application base. For packaging, it's what? The number of units made. And then this problem called out and asked us what? What is the cost of the dessert bar? Okay, so even though they give us information about ice cream sandwiches, we just want to know the dessert bar, right, for this question. Now, when you're working this question for homework, guys, and you're studying for your test and stuff, there's no penalty associated with, okay, I did it for dessert bars based on the fact problem. Let me try ice cream sandwiches, right? Right? And you may not be shocked if then you see ice cream sandwiches on your exam, right? Right? Okay, so that's a good way to study for this stuff. And so let's just go ahead and let's take a look and see how they're going to do that. So for the extrusion activity, okay, whatever. What is extrusion? Anybody know? That's where the ice, kind of like when Snoop Dogg was looking at the sausages being made. Sounds kind of like that. Okay, that's extrude. Now I know what that is. Okay, so Did anybody look that video up? Okay, Snoop Dogg looking at sausages being made. Okay, so anyway, that's extrusion, huh? That's a good name for it. Okay, so what happens? We come over and we pick up the total extrusion cost, and then we want to come up with the amount per batch. And so you take a look, and we have what? 400 batches for ice cream. We have 350 batches for dessert bars, so we're going to add those together, and that becomes my denominator here, doesn't it? That's what? Is that the 750 for each one of those? So now I have a rate per batch for extrusion, don't I? Okay, but I also have to do the same thing with this other activity, which is what? Packing. In packing, they use volume 350 versus what? Versus the 200. So I add those two together. I pick up that packing cost. I add those number of units together, and that gives me now a cost per unit for the packing, doesn't it? Right? And in this question, they asked me about dessert bars. Is that what they asked me about here? So since they asked me for dessert bars, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, okay, well, extrusion's 850, and dessert bars have what? 350 batches, so there's their cost for extrusion. Packing is 8 cents per, and they have how many units? We use units. Dessert bars made up 200,000 of those total units, so we take those total costs, and now we know the total overhead cost that's going to be assigned to the dessert bars, right? We assign the cost by activity. I mean, if you understood that first little problem that we went through on that PDF file, these are easier than that one, isn't it? Because there's only two, right? Question? Okay, let's try another one. Okay, we got plenty of time to go through this stuff, because we're at some point, for some reason, we're moving along pretty quick in here. So, and I'm going to sit here and do like 10 questions with you. So if there's a question, stop me because we got time to deal with it.
So our first do we only have one midterm in this class?
Yes.
Okay, so then that's in a month, right?
First midterm is supposed to be on October 17th.
But like, you said it was just the first 5 chapters.
Yeah, it is.
How's that working?
You mean how are we going to fill up the time? Is that what you're asking me? I don't know.
I'm just confused because like I know in one you had 2 midterms and then like it was 5 chapters for each one.
Yeah. Yeah, we had 2 midterms for Accounting 100, but they only have 1 midterm for A, but they only have 2 midterms for B. I think what we're going to have to do once we finish, first of all, Chapter 5 is, to me, the most important chapter in this whole class when we go into cost, volume, profit analysis. And so we'll probably spend quite a bit of time with that chapter, getting comfortable with it. But I think we're in good shape. Hey, I don't know. What do you want me to do? Cover 3 chapters a class? So it starts to become one of these things. We're getting 2 chapters a week in here. So I think our best use of our time once we've gone through the chapters will be to continue to go through practice questions. So I'm going to have to come up with, some additional practice questions like this, and we'll just work them, and at some point I'll start sitting down and you'll start standing up and you'll show me how you work the questions, right? So we're going to get a lot of practice in prior to the exam. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I've assigned the assignments.
Since you haven't done that yet.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Okay. Let's keep that. So let's go ahead from current. And so we're good with this one now? Hello? We're good with this one? Okay. All right, good. So let's go ahead and let's take a look then at this next one. And we're seeing now that we have 3 different activities, a couple different products. Okay, similar to before, we had sandwiches and health bars or whatever they were, candy bars, whatever they were. Now we're dealing with what? Now we're dealing with product A, product B, and then we have 3 different activities that we're going to be considering. In the one that we went through in the PDF file, it was several activities, right? So this one's still easier than this one. And so we come over and they tell us that our annual production and sale of product A is 34,300 units and product B is 69,550 units, and they want the appropriate approximate overhead cost per unit now of what? Product A, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to allocate each one of these activity costs to our product A, and it's based on the activity that we're using for these. So we take for activity 1, 3,000 plus 2,800. That gives me what, 5,800? And that's the base. How much does product A use? Product A uses the 3,000, don't they? So there's my allocation base, and it's a total for activity 1 of 87,000. So I bring that down. There's my what? There's my allocation of product A of activity 1, right? Allocating it by activity instead of a factory-wide one like we were using, instead of a departmental level one. This is much more accurate, isn't it? Okay. Then what? Then we come over and we do the same thing for activity 2. 4,500 plus 5,500. We get that, add that together. What's that? 10,000? Okay. Activity A, product A, I should say, is only using 4,500. And so we go ahead, pick up the activity cost for activity 2, multiply that by that ratio. That gives us the number for activity 2, right? And then we go ahead and we do the same thing for activity 3, right? Do I need to draw all these crazy lines on this one? Right? We're just taking that, the total, bringing it down. The cost is 30,000 that goes to that. So you total all those up, and that comes to this 102,900, right? Okay, and you take that 102,900, you divide it by the number of units. This thing's looking like a spider on crack here. You do what? You divide that by 3,400, 300, the number of units. That gives us the cost per unit, doesn't it? All this managerial accounting stuff, this accounting, whatever they call this class, BA 101B is pretty fun stuff, isn't it? Okay, so you should be starting to throw your managerial accounting parties pretty soon here, right? Where you're inviting your friends over to practice with this stuff with you. Okay. Okay, good. No? In the movie, you're gonna make a movie called The Accountant? Oh, do they? Oh, I gotta go see that. There was a there was a movie called Stranger Than Fiction with Will Ferrell, where some lady, I forget the actress's name. She's a very famous English actress. Huh? Emma Thompson. You've seen it? She's sitting there and she's playing an author that's writing a book, and she writes the book, and everything that she writes happens to him. And so he's hearing her voice in his head, and he goes to see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist says you're schizophrenic. And then he finally decides to go to a literature professor, looks like kind of like at a university, community college, whatever, to explain to him if he's in a tragedy or a comedy or what it is. And the reason I like that movie is because he's an IRS auditor, so he's a government worker. You know, he's starting to hear voices in his head, so I could kind of relate to that. Okay. Anyway, so and it took me a while to get to the punchline of that one. Huh? Stranger Than Fiction. Because she's writing a book about him, and all the stuff that she writes happens to him, and he thinks he's losing his mind, and then he finally realizes it's real. Okay. Anyway, stop. This is not a film class, right? Okay. So anyway, let's go ahead and let's take a look at this one now. Oh, no. What is this? Same question? Different one, but you guys like practice with this. So let's just go ahead and let's take a look. We have what? We have product A1, product B2. We want to figure out what is the cost of A1, and so we go ahead, add the two um, amounts of the activity that each one will use. That's the total. That's the 6,000. These guys use what? 1,200 of that. We multiply that by the 48,000. There's the amount that's supposed to go to activity 1. Do the same thing for activity 2. Do the same thing for activity 3. Pick up the cost that's associated with each one of those. Bang, bang. We now know the total cost of this what? Product A1? You want me to slow down? Want me to slow down? I'm going faster because it's the same exact thing we did before, isn't it? Want me to go a little slower? I can. Okay, so we're just adding those up, bringing that over. Take the total of these. That's the 101,760. You go ahead and you divide that by the number of units of this product A1. That gives me the cost per product, right? Okay, per unit, I should say. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and let's do this next one. This one's B2. Let's not do it, right? I'm realizing this is pretty too easy to do it again. Unless you want me to. Okay, let's see if we can find a variation here. And again, when I select these questions, I'm looking for things that I think will be indicative of the exam, right? Okay, so let's take a look at this one. This one now we have what? We have dog food and cat food. Okay, good. So now at least we're not dealing with human food here, right? Okay, and they give us the units, they give us the batches, and on the left panel, guys, is the question, and on the right panel is the way to go through the solution. But let's go ahead and let's see what they tell us about this one. Let's read the question here. Assume that pet food is considering adding 2 types of pet food to its existing product line, dog and cat. Research has determined that good demand exists for dog food in 40-pound bags, and cat food, I need to hit space there, half-pound cans. That's half-pound cans. And the company identified the following partial list of activities and cost drivers. So we have what? We have our handling activity. We have our storage cost as our activities. We have the cost expected associated with that. We have the what? We have the number of units for our dog and cat food, and the number of units is going to be our handling driver. And then what? And then we have the batches made, and we're going to use that. Or is it the other way around? Other way around. I got them the other way around. It's the number of batches for handling. Number of batches for handling. So let me go ahead and think I can do more good with the pen here than the highlighter. So it's the number of batches for handling, right? And it's the what? The weight of the product. So we're going to have to do a little bit of conversion here because they're giving me the number of units, aren't they? They're giving me the number of units, but I'm going to have to convert those units into what? Into pounds here because they're using the weight, aren't they? But they've told me that what? We're talking 40-pound bags of dog food and half-pound cans of cat food, right? So I'm going to be able to convert those into the pounds pretty easily, right? To be able to to be able to answer this question, okay, to weight. So you come over and for the handling cost, and we're first going to do dog food. We're going to do both dog and cat food. For this first one, we go ahead and we pick up the what? The handling cost, and we're using batches for that. The dog food used 200 of the total 350 batches. 350 batches are right here, right? That's where we got the 350, and the dogs count for 200 batches. And so we say that $60 per batch for the dog food. And then we go ahead and we come up with what? For the storage cost, and this is the only thing that made this one maybe a little bit tricky, it's what? It's 40 pounds per product. They're going to make 100,000 units, so that comes at $4 million. 100,000 units times 4 pounds per, that's 4 million pounds, right? Okay, and then for the cat food, they're making what? They're making 200,000 of those. Oh, we're not ready for cat food yet, so we'll do cat food when we do cat food because we're stuck on dog food right now, right? Right? So we're just going to do the dog food right now. So that's 4 million pounds, and then we go ahead and we take the 4 million pounds. Oh, we do have to do the cat food pounds, don't we? So it's what? It's 100. There it is. It's 200,000 to get the base. We have to do the cat food. It's 200,000 cans times how much per can? Half pound per can. So it's 100,000 pounds for the cat food. So we now have our what? We have our base, don't we? 4,100,000. 4 million pounds for the dog food and 100,000 pounds for the cat food, right? Right? Hello? Okay. Okay, good. So now what? Now we sit here and we go ahead and just allocate that. The dog food's taking up most of that resource, right? And so what, of the 820,000, 800,000 goes to the dog food? Okay. And so we add those two together, the amount per batch for the materials handling, the amount per pound for the storage cost, and the cost of the dog food is 860, right? Now, if you're taking the test, one thing you could do at this point is just say, well, whatever I've assigned to the dog food of the cost per activity, the difference between that and the total is going to go to the cat food, isn't it? Is that another way of solving this? Okay, but if you just go through and do it the way they're talking about here, we're going to pick up the 105, 105,000, and what? The cat food constitutes 150 of the total 350 batches, right? Okay, so 45,000 goes to the cat food, and all I was saying is if you wanted to, you could have done what? You could have taken 100,000, which 105,000. You could have taken 105,000 and just subtracted what from it? That's the total. And just subtract what from that to get cat? Subtract the dog, right? Okay, and the dog food was 60,000. So that means there's how much left? 45,000 left. Right? Which is what we did using the calculation and using the base also. So you could have gotten it that way as well. Okay. All right, but then what? Then for the storage cost, the cat food is constituting 100,000 of the total 4,100,000, right? And so we're going to allocate what? 20,000 per unit, and you could have again gotten the total storage cost and took off the amount per unit that went to the dog food. I'm not going to do that calculation again. And so if we pick up the 45 plus the 25,000, we're assigning 65,000 to cat food, right? Are you a cat person or a dog person? Question? Oh. Well, she looked confused, but you had the question. Okay, go ahead. So maybe you both have a question.
So for the cat food, it's like 45,000, right? And for
Yeah.
the answer is 65,000. Why different?
Yeah, it's the total. That 45,000 is this 45,000 right here. 45,000. This right here was just for the what? For the what was it? For the handling? That's just handling. That's just handling. We have handling, we have storage, right? Okay, forget this. I was just trying to show you another way to come up with the answer, but if that's confusing you, just forget it and just do it this way. So just forget that. So it's 45,000 for the handling, allocating it the way we did, and it's what? It's 20,000 for the storage, calculating the way we did. 45,000 plus 20,000 is 65,000. And if that confuses you, just don't look at that. I was just saying that if you had a total of 105,000, maybe I shouldn't have struck it out because somebody might want to see it. I'll write it back. But 105,000 for the handling for the dog food. I'm just saying that if it was 105,000 and you've already allocated 60,000 to the dog food, there's only 45,000 left to go, right? But that's not the final answer. Then you've got to get the 20,000, which we calculated for the handling, right? Just showing you how to save time on the test.
Why are we looking for the pound of product?
Because we use the number, the problem told us because we are going to use pounds, aren't we? Is our cost driver? Cost driver right here is the pounds of the dog food. But the problem didn't give me the pounds. The problem gave me what? Units right here, units. So I have to turn the units into pounds, don't I? And so since they told me that it's a half a pound per can of cat food and 40 pounds per bag or whatever of dog food, then I have to convert those by multiplying the units by 40 for the dog food and by a half, 0.5 for the cat food. Yes, sir.
I'm still a little confused how you got the 4,100,000. Is that how you got the 4 million?
Uh-huh.
How did you get the 4 million?
The 100,000 is the cat
Oh,
food. So the dog food was 4 million, right?
yeah.
Which was 40 pounds per bag times, what was it, 100,000 bags? So that's where the 4 million came from, right? And then to get the cat food, it was 0.5 times the number of. That's all right, because this thing was starting to look messy anyway. I don't know what happened. But it was what? It was,
0.5 times 200,000.
right, so it was 100,000 bags of dog food times what?
40.
Times 40 pounds per. Times, that's LBS, believe it or not, 40 pounds. That's what, 4 million?
Yeah.
You're with me now, I can tell, right, by the tone of your voice, okay? And then the cat food, it was what, 200,000 cans times how many pounds per? 0.5, that's the 100,000. And that gave me the now total allocation base of 4,100,000, right, which they were using right there. 4,100,000, and then the dogs represented 4 million of that. The cats only represented 100,000 of that total. Okay. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and let's try another one. Now it's back. I cannot figure out why it went away and why it came back. I have no. Oh, what was this one? Oh, this was a different problem now. So all they wanted to know, so we got the total. I see what I did here. We got the total, didn't we? And so what I did was I showed you, the amount per unit, I should say. So I just brought down the answer to the previous question, right? So if you were getting this as a second question, I said, okay, now how much is the total that goes to dog and to cat food? You just take the amount per unit here that we calculated. That was the answer. That was the answer to the last problem, wasn't it? Or was the total the answer to the last problem? Oh, here it is. Here was the total from the last problem. It's over here. Here was the total from the last problem, right? So that last problem, we calculated the total. And all we're doing now is we're taking those totals and dividing it by the number of units of dog and cat food, right? To get the amount per unit. So that would have been like the second question in a series of questions about this. So we came up with the total in the first problem, and then this one, all we had to do was get the amount per unit, right? Okay. Okay. Question? Okay. How about this one? We've got this list of activities, and here we go with excursion cost again, and they want us to figure out, well, excursion, batch handling, and order packaging. So we have to do 3 of them in this one, don't we? Okay, and so what happens? We pick up the excursion cost of $83,600. We bring that down, okay, and then we're going to go ahead and say, okay, there's what? 750 batches. Since we use batches for that, we got 750 plus 200, so we got what? 950. They went ahead and did it, showing you the addition there. It's 950 total, and that gives me $88 per batch, right? Same thing now for the handling. Pick up the handling. Pick up orders as the driver. So it's at a total of $275. The amount per order, right? Okay. And then I go ahead and I have the packaging cost. Pick that up. The driver there is what? Units. Pick that up. There's the amount per what? Per unit. And then if I wanted to allocate these to the different things, I would just do it by the number of each one of these activities that they use, and I could add the total together, divide that by the number of units, and that would give me the price per unit, right? Is this fun? Here's another one. Same logic. Okay. Oh, this is actually, again, one of those ones where I'm taking the answer to the previous problem to answer this one. So all I did was I stuck the what? I stuck the answer from the previous problem right there. Okay, and then we just simply went ahead and said, okay, they're asking me product A. And so since product A is using what? 200 batches, there's your cost for product A. Since we're having 75 orders for product A, just using the answer from the previous question, there's your handling cost for product A. And then we do the same thing for packaging, right? And the total cost is what? Add those together is $42,500. And if they wanted the cost per unit, I guess I'd have to take that what? 42,500 in product A. How many units? 750. I would divide that by the 750, right? And that would give me the cost per unit. Whatever that comes out to. Okay. Okay, good. Well, this is starting to get a little ponderous now, isn't it? You want to do another one? Might as well. I think this is the last one. So let's just go ahead. Let's power through this one. Okay, so what happens? They have the amount of cost that we want to assign to the base model. Oh, well, this is a little interesting because it's choppers. Okay, not that I ride a chopper, but I can understand the appreciation of those. Okay, and so what happens? They want us to figure out what the cost of the base unit is, and so we do what? For the number of setups, it's 22,500, and we're going to do what? We're going to come up with a cost per setup of $375, 20 setups for the base, 40 for the loaded. And so that gives us $375. We do the same thing for the components here, which is the 27,000. and then the base there is the 15 and the 25, and that's 675. And then to come up with the amount of overhead allocated to the base, they had how many setups? 20 setups, right? Times the 375, and what? 15 setups times the 675, right? Why are we doing this? Because it's chapter 4 and chapter 4 was on the syllabus. Why are we doing this? Why does the company care?
They probably want to get the more precise amount of costs as
Right.
compared to a traditional system. They want to allocate the cost evenly towards every single activity,
Yeah.
so they can determine which activity costs more, which one costs more or less. I mean, or less or
Yeah, so that we're getting a better costing of these base models in this premium model, whatever they're calling it, loaded model, so that if we didn't do it this way, we'd use traditional, we might come up with a distorted cost associated with either or both of these, when we could be what? We could be undercharging for the, say, the loaded model and overcharging for the base model, right? And so we could change our pricing structure around so that, hey, we can actually lower the price of the base, sell more of those, and still be profitable on that. And what? And maybe for the loaded model, we start looking at ways of analyzing the particular activities that are driving that cost, and maybe we can work on bringing the cost of that particular activity down a little bit more. So now what? We're selling more of the base model, and we're selling what? We're selling maybe the same amount of the loaded model, because someone's probably willing to pay a little extra for that loaded model, so we can keep the price the same, but if we can bring down the cost a little bit, that's going to drive the profitability of the company, right? Okay. And if our company is profitable, what's that going to mean? What's that thing? The more money, right? Okay, that's what we're shooting for here. You guys are probably too young to remember that one, but anyway, look it up on YouTube. Okay? After you look at this video, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the difficulty of doing that, because what happens? Traditional model, everybody is sitting there and they're comfortable with the traditional model, and they're driving their costs using one factory right overhead rate, and they have their accounting system all set up to do that, right? And here you come in and saying, well, look, I went to Ohlone and we learned about, activity-based costing, and this is a much more effective way, and we can make some improvements around here, etc., right? Do you think you're going to get this reaction that you're seeing here? Which of these reactions do you think you're going to have? Do you think you're going to have the people clapping? Do you think you're going to be getting the fist pumps? Or do you think you're going to be this guy trying to drag everybody up the stairs of profitability? What do you think?
strong top management support.
Yeah, okay, so, and that is important, yeah, and so so let's talk about the solutions. I'm talking about the problems right now, okay? And we'll get the solutions here in a second. My point is I'm leveraging off these pictures. There's probably not going to be a lot of clapping and fist pumping when you start trying to make a change like this, and there's more of this dragging people towards the finish line here, right? Okay? And so what happens? Yeah, to solve that, top management support, one, right? That's a sponsorship. If everybody knows that the CFO is on board with this, the CEO is on board with this, the managers of the different departments, et cetera, are on board with this, then we're going to have a better chance of making this thing work, right? Okay. Cross-functional involvement. So you're sitting here in the accounting department. You're saying we're going to do this because this is going to get us better information, right? But what's going to happen as you gather the data? for this activity base. Instead of getting one plant-wide number that you're using the driver, you're going to be going to the production supervisor and saying, you know, for the next year, we need you to gather this information. What are they going to be saying? Oh, boy, here comes that pencil pusher again telling me that I have to sit here and come up with these numbers, right? Okay, so you're going to have to get that sort of buy-in. He's going to have to know that the plant manager is on board with this whole effort, right? And then, you know, link the rewards to the link to evaluations and rewards. So, I don't know, maybe you have as an expectation that individuals would participate in, you know, office improvement or factory improvement projects or something. And so you're looking for them. Maybe that's how you drive the cross-functional involvement, right? Well, gee, it says in your performance plan that you're supposed to be involved in a committee. How come you didn't join the ABC committee or whatever, right? I don't know. Okay. Question? I don't know what to tell you guys. This stuff is not supposed to go this fast. You're not supposed to be just sponges taking everything in quite like this. Question? Oh.
Can you repeat all these?
Huh? Could it be all of these? What'd you say?
I kind of don't understand what's the problem that you're talking about.
Strong top management support?
Yep.
You know, memos and stuff, emails, banners around the factory that say, have you filled out your ABC cost evaluation form or whatever? I don't know. ABC is coming. What is ABC? Ask me about ABC t-shirts. I don't know. Top management support, okay? They're going to have to be, you know, on board with this whole thing. You're going to have to sell it to them first. You know, depending on how involved this gets, you may need to be getting to your board of directors with something like this, right? Because what's going to happen? Board of directors are supposed to oversee the audit committee of the board of directors is supposed to oversee accounting issues, right? So maybe it's a good idea to have a presentation at the board of directors, right, and get them involved, get their input, right, get them to, you know, talk at this, maybe even at the stockholders meeting, talking about improvements in our accounting systems, that sort of thing. Get your auditors involved. Every corporation has to be audited, so you're going to probably get your auditors involved. In fact, that's probably a good point that we should add to this, right? Because what happens? You don't want to sit there and have your auditors come in and you say, by the way, we revised our entire accounting system to an activity-based costing system. Have fun now as you try to audit this, right? So we might call them in early on in the process and say, look, these are some of the things that we're doing. Now, an auditor, to maintain their independence, would not want to consult you on that, okay? I told you the story about the Forest Service in here, right? Okay, that was the trouble that GAO had gotten into in that particular situation. Well, we almost got into trouble, but we made the right decision. But the problem that was potentially causing the trouble was that I think we said too much about their cost accounting system, and we're looking at some things. I don't think they were doing activity-based costing, but we gave a little too much input, and so that then as far as the Forest Service was concerned, we now owned some of what they were doing in that system, right? And that's an independence problem. Auditors cannot audit their own work. So you would have to make clear to them that you are there to understand more than you are there to evaluate, and but you might ask some questions that would help them to understand, oh, okay, yeah, maybe this is a different way to do it or something, but they make the decisions as to how to do it. But anyway, from the company standpoint, they would absolutely want to involve their auditors sooner rather than later, because this is going to drive how we're going to accumulate our costs potentially for our financial reporting purposes, right? That's all I got, guys. There's nothing else. Don't worry, this will get longer here. I'm sure you're not worried about that. But we're going to get into Chapter 5 next time now. Chapter 5 is Cost, Volume, Profit Analysis. This is I think, the sort of centerpiece of this course. So make sure that you're on time. Did the attendance sheet go around? Okay, make sure that you are on time, guys. Okay, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to be anywhere on time at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, it's not like this is a 6 o'clock in the morning class or something. So make sure you have signed in or written your name on the attendance sheet if you don't see your name on there. And I will see you on Monday. And I'm going to try to do a little better to get the slides up there sooner so that you're seeing them sooner. And the homework assignments we've established in Connect for people that are using that, okay? All right, guys. Sure. Just let me, give me 1 second. I want to keep this. And I want to pause the recording.